It was a usual Sunday morning. I was browsing the local newspaper and I stumbled over an article regarding the cost of working from home. The federal court has ordered a company to pay one of their employees 150 Swiss francs per month for their home-based office, or home office as we call it. The company argued that the employee didn't get a bigger place and therefore didn't have any other costs. Furthermore, they argued that expense for a home-based office was never agreed in the first place. Naturally, I wondered, how much does my office at home cost me? Both arguments were declined, saying that the employee sacrificed space at home that she pays rent for and therefore has to be reimbursed. As I'm scrolling through the comment section, I come across a number of negative comments slamming the court ruling as stupid and unbelievable. One comment even suggested I would lay that person off, since there are numerous qualified people out there looking for a job. So how much does my home-based office set me back? I had to find out. And there was one comment in particular that was a bit of a needle in my eye. Now obviously I can't show names, data privacy and all that stuff, but I'm going to just loosely translate it. And what it says is, superb, now office people sit around at home, do a little bit of home office, have no expenses in terms of transportation to get to work. On top of that, they get reimbursed and reduced ticket prices from the Swiss railway system. And now on top of that, they want to get some sort of money from their employers for their 1.5 square meters to work. And it actually says work in little quotation marks. He continues, and that while people in a system relevant job have made sure that you guys have food and also that toilet paper isn't running out. Speaking of toilet paper, how about you take 2 rolls of toilet paper back home with you, because that's a cost that the office no longer has. Okay, now one, I realize this person is a person who works in an essential business, who during this whole lockdown had to work probably more than other people to make sure that everything's stocked up. I'm not too sure about the whole making sure you don't run out of toilet paper, because everyone did run out of toilet paper. And I get your point of view to whomever wrote that comment, because you did have an essential job and obviously we thank you for that. But what I completely disagree with is the whole quotation work, because a lot of people have actually noticed while working from home that A, it wasn't easy, it takes a lot of discipline to get all the work done. And also it takes a lot of discipline, and this is the other extreme, to actually make sure you stop working, you take breaks, and you don't lose yourself in like a 12, 13-hour shift when usually you work 8.5, 9 hours. And I imagine it to be very tricky and difficult to work when you have kids around. And let's say Layla and I have a 2-bedroom or 1-bedroom apartment, so a bedroom and the living room. And essentially for a lot of people who are not equipped for home office, their dining table, their breakfast bar, their coffee table has turned into an office, and they have to spread all their work all of a sudden in this technically a living area, which was a comfort zone, which has also now turned and transformed into a working zone. And another thing is, people have been using the ride home on the train, tram, subway, in the car, wherever it may be, to just cool down, shut down, process whatever has been going on in the daily work. However, the question, is it actually justified for someone to get reimbursed from home? Everyone has to know that for themselves. I will touch that in a second. But before I do, I would like to find out, how much does it actually cost me personally to work from home? Let's do a little calculation together in my office. Let me take you there. So, this is my workspace. If you've watched the self-isolation series, you've seen this desk before. It's not a big area that I give up to work in. As you can see, this is a fairly small desk, and some of you might need a lot more space to work and have all the devices set up.
Now, I am curious to calculate what costs come together for me personally over the course of a month when working from home. Now, we need to take into consideration what costs actually do accumulate over that period. Now, one, that is space. You pay rent, you give up a bit of space for your work. Two would be, and that's the most consuming, is energy. You have laptop, I have an external monitor, I have a light. I usually use main lights and nightstand as well if it gets really dark, which is usually in the afternoon on a rainy day in particular. I'm not going to calculate these, I'm just going to see what's on the disk. So that means laptop, monitor and lamp. And one thing we tend to forget is obviously something that you don't see. That is either heating or cooling. If you have air conditioning in particular, that is very energy consuming. So that needs to be taken into consideration. We have had a fairly mild, I would even say warm spring. That means the heating was off the majority of the time. But what really costs is obviously cooling yourself down if you have a cooling system or an air conditioning, which we're not allowed here in Zurich. You need a permit to have air conditioning. So what we would get is a fan. We also have like a little table fan about this size. And obviously in the summer when it gets hot, which you can get, we would use, or I would use, while I'm working from my desk. So I'm going to have to take this into consideration as well. Lastly, one thing we obviously need to communicate with one another is the internet. Now I have calculated for the amount of hours I work versus the amount of hours I do not work, just because I had fun with it. Whether or not you want to take this into consideration is totally up to you, but I just had fun doing a little bit of math, so I took this into consideration as well. So how much does it cost to work from home? Starting with number one, that is space.
Here we have our disk, and this is the space we need to move around in to work. So the space I technically sacrifice to work in, if you will. Now we're going to measure the depth as well as the width of that space, which in my case is fairly small. We're looking at a desk and a space area that is 1.2 meters wide and roughly a meter deep. So as you can see, a fairly small space that I need for my office, which is not universal. That is obviously different for everyone. This is also quite an easy calculation. 1.2 meters times 1 is 1.2 square meters. And with an average of 18 Swiss francs per month for Zurich, according to the Federal Office of Statistics here in Switzerland, 1.2 square meters times 18 francs results in 22.3 Swiss francs per month for my office.
As you can see, 22.3 Swiss francs per month does not appear to be that much. I think it also depends on which part of the world you're from. Some places you will be spending quite a bit less per square meter, but there are also places like, I don't know, I imagine New York City, San Francisco, London, Singapore, Hong Kong, and so on, to be quite expensive places. So I guess rent will be a bit higher, and therefore the square meter price will also be higher. So this obviously will boost that price. Also, this, like I said earlier, is a fairly small space and is not a long-term solution if that was to be my devoted working area. I do have an office with way more space that I am now entitled to go to again. We have reopened our offices. But some people obviously might have a printer, they might have 2 monitors, a laptop, etc. And they give up the whole dining table, if you will. So obviously the amount of space will go up, probably the price will go up as well, like I said, depending on where you live. So this has to be taken into consideration. For me personally, it is not that big of a cut, so that is not that bad. Where it does cut in is obviously the energy. Like I said, laptop, monitor, lamp, and the fan, should I use one.
We're gonna make a little table with every object that I just mentioned, how much energy it uses, the usage itself, so how many hours a day I'm using that object, and what we have as in total energy consumption per object. Starting with the laptop, the obvious one. Now I looked it up. In average, when operating, my laptop uses 20 watts and it runs for roughly 6.5 hours a day. Now I work 8.5 hours, but not everything I do is on the laptop. So I just thought a rough estimation is 6.5 hours. That results in 130 watt hours per day. And then we have the monitor, which uses slightly more energy, but obviously it also has a wider screen, therefore uses a lot more energy. That runs simultaneously with the laptop, resulting in 169 watt hours per day. And then we have the lamp, which is fairly energy efficient. It has an LED lamp inside, and that I assume that even if the laptop is not being used, if I read something up, or if I'm making notes, if I'm on a phone call, the lamp I might not be turning off all the time. So let's just say this runs the whole day while I'm working for 8.5 hours, results in 59.5, or you could call it 60 watt hours per day. And like I said, a fan or cooling, air conditioning is quite energy intense, and you can see that a tiny little fan uses quite a bit of energy already, 35 watts while it's operating. And let's just say this operates during a time I'm at my laptop for 6.5 hours. That results in 227.5 watt hours. So our total energy consumption per day is 586 watt hours. Now what you obviously got to do is use that number times the amount of days that you work in a specific month, which, you know, for my calculation, I'm using 20 days. And just to highlight the difference with or without a fan, I'm looking at 358.5 watt hours, which over the course of a month makes a huge difference.
As you can see, the energy is probably the biggest chunk of costs, I would say. I did also calculate the internet, like I said earlier. That turned out to be around 14 francs per month, so also not that much. And like I said, whether or not, I mean, we need it anyway, or we use it anyway, so we pay for it anyway. Whether or not, you know, an employer should contribute to that is a whole other story. I did also calculate how much it would cost me without the fan running, and it is quite significantly lower. So versus the roughly 306 Swiss francs, we had roughly 187 Swiss francs if I left the fan out. And this just shows you that cooling yourself down, air conditioning, and this was just a tiny little fan, costs quite a bit of energy and therefore quite a bit of money. So that's definitely to take into consideration by, you know, if you need to cool places down.
So what costs do accumulate when we are working from home? We say we have our space, which is 22.3 francs per month. Then we have the energy for laptop, lights, etc. Now, with the fan, this results in 11.72 kilowatt hours for a month, and the energy price here in Zurich for the energy package that we have, which is all sustainable, so meaning renewable sources, is 26.18 Swiss francs per kilowatt hour. This results in a hot summer's day with the fan running all the time in 306.83 Swiss francs per month. As you can see, the biggest chunk of the bill. And then, like I said, the internet I have calculated to be 14 francs per month, so a total cost of 343.13 Swiss francs per month. So roughly 340 francs per month.
Now, on top of the cost, or apart from the cost, we have to consider there are also savings, right? So for instance, the one and most obvious is if you have to drive to work, you save yourself money for fuel. If you do take public transport, then maybe the cost for a ticket for your train, for your metro, tube, subway, whatever it is that you have in your part of the world, you might save from that money, which then has to be deducted of that cost, because otherwise it wouldn't be a fair comparison. And lastly, and this is a very important saving, I think, is time. You save probably a ton of time getting to work and coming back from work. Now, if you're here in Zurich and you work in Zurich, then obviously, I don't know, it takes you 20 minutes, 30 minutes to get to work, which is fine. But if I listen to my German colleagues, where one way to get to work and the same to get back home is 1.5 hours each way, is quite a bit. That's 3 hours a day. That's 15 hours a week. That's 2 working days almost a week that you spend driving to work and from work. And this is potential time, quality time that you can spend with your partner, with your kids, should you have any, with your friends. So what price tag do you put on that for every hour? That's a tricky one. And I'm guessing it outweighs the amount of money you have in your bank account. So I'd rather have quality time with the people that I love spending time with than these extra pennies. So this could go into the calculation. The tricky bit is putting a number on it, right? But this brings me to the point of this whole video. The point wasn't to show you how much it could cost me to work from home. The point of this video is to tell you need to find what is right for yourself, to be content with what you do for a living. I could go looking left and right and see comparisons on what I could squeeze out of that lemon even more. But as long as I'm fine with what I have, and also my job security being given thanks to me working from home in this pandemic, then I don't think I have to run to the employer and say but I have seen the court ruling, you must pay me money. No, I don't care, because I was fine before, I was fine during, and I am fine after. There is always someone that makes way more, and there's always someone who will make way less than you. And you got to find for yourself what it is, the number that you need to be content and not complain. So you can go to work, fulfill your work, and be happy, if you will, to be content with what you've got and what you've been reimbursed, if you will, for work. For many, this is just a temporary solution, but it also secures your existence by just keeping your job and doing this for a shorter period of time. Obviously, this is not a long-term solution. If that all of a sudden turns into a long-term solution, into a permanent solution, that's a whole different story. That's when you need to step up and say, all right, this was not the arrangement. But if it's just a temporary solution, I think it is well worth showing appreciation that, I still have work. We have a lot of friends in gastro that all of a sudden, from day 1 to day 2, had no work whatsoever, and there was no other way to do their work. So be grateful for what you have, and find for yourself what you need, so you don't have to go looking too far left and too far right to compare yourself to others. As long as you are happy, that is the main thing. So I hope you like this little breakdown, this little rundown on cost of working from home, or home office as we call it in the German-speaking world. Just to give you a little bit of an insight on how it could be calculated, and also, more importantly, the message of finding what it is for you to be content and to be grateful for what you have and the opportunities that we are giving in this time. In the next video, I'd like to speak about something that we might come across when going back into the new normal, and that is by being overwhelmed by everything that's going on around us, namely being stressed. I want to talk about what stress is, the different levels of stress, and how we could probably identify, is it an issue that we can deal with, is it an issue that we have to, source out, if you will, and also how to hopefully prevent getting stressed. So if that's something that you would want to see, make sure you subscribe, tune in for the next one. Until then, hope you enjoy this one, and I'll see you next time.